All right, we are back. How's everyone doing today? Mhm.
Hey
So,
everyone.
so we're joined by Paul Wardy. It's 5 in the morning over there. I appreciate the sacrifice, honestly. I mean, I know this is how you know Paul loves what we do. He'll just get up really early and try to do something with it. It's gonna be funny because I'm gonna try to pull you over in some OData session midday, and I'd like to see the grumpy, haven't slept in like 20 hours, Paul Wardy. What does that look like? It's probably the everyday usual, Paul, but we'll see. Anyway, before we get started, Brian, I think, I appreciate the community and the amazing work that people are doing. Brian, you brought up some people left some comments for us on the RESTful sense, and they said, let's take a look here at this is how you're doing interactive learning. People are actually genuinely are interested into what we're doing, and I think there's an issue in there. Someone opened that up, which is configure. This is okay. Fix
And
completion.
that one. Yep.
Check usage for HTTP client. Let's dig into this a little bit just to see what's happening in here, right? So, so what I'm seeing in here is that, um, let's see here. Hey, Elbic, how are you doing?
Hey,
Oh,
good.
your internet is a disaster today. Why are you cutting out? What happened?
Oh, let me try to fix that.
Are you connected on your mobile network or something? Okay.
Now it's
Let's
fine.
so this brother here, I don't know how to say the name, Jodindal. Jodindal? Okay. So Jodindal left us a comment. If creating HTTP client manually, new HTTP client that is either disposed frequently or is long running, it is recommended to create your own HTTP message handler to handle lifetimes, etc., to avoid socket exhaustion and DNS update failures. I would recommend just using iHTTP Client Factory to create new HTTP instances, which handles all of this really well. I have dealt with this issue quite a few times in production environments, with long running, high throughput scenarios. It's not an obvious issue, but eventually rears its ugly head. Further reading. Okay, I think we should seriously consider this. Hey, Athena. Hey, Gregory here, Mabruk. Go ahead.
Yeah, I did a little bit of research on this. It seems like it's a real thing. The DNS stuff is to do with using the same client for many different API endpoints. So you're basically redirecting it from one DNS, from one point to another.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, so it's saying you should have a separate HTTP client for
Okay.
that. And the HTTP client factory has a really good way of managing a pool of connections.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think we should be trying to reinvent the wheel. We should be
Okay.
just, yeah.
And I think RESTful Sense, if as far as I remember, RESTful Sense does play with HTTP Factory. I could swear. Oh
Mm-hmm.
wait, no, we did this. We did this last time. By the way, I think Christo told me he released a new version as well because he saw some other fixes that you had to make in there. That's perfect. I appreciate that. I don't know what kind of conversation is going on here. I didn't keep up, but it looks like the two of you is leaving you some comments,
Yep.
for RESTful Sense WebAssembly. So I could swear at some point in time I was using the HTTP factory, and I don't know what happened there. It seems like I switched over at some point to HTTP client. Something has happened there, and we certainly need to kind of take care of this. In fact, what I was talking to Christo about the other day, I said RESTful Sense needs a revisit. Now it has 88,000 downloads. We need to revisit this, and we need to make sure that it's broken down properly. It's doing a lot of great things. It's broken the way I expect it to be broken. I see clients and controllers. I see models, and then I see services, right? So I think some of that stuff could go back. We could create some brokers for these, especially the things that are native. native framework, functionality, or things are coming out of HTTP client, we could push that back a little bit. That could be its own series, at its own time.
If we do a rewrite on that, we could unify the two libraries. The main issue with the
Oh,
WebAssembly,
really?
yeah, with the main issue with the WebAssembly was the older library wasn't compatible with core.
Okay,
So,
let's do that. Yeah, I like that.
mhm.
Okay, okay. So what I'm gonna say here is that oh, I did reference you. Okay, he answered. Yeah, perfect. Great. This is all great stuff. I appreciate that. Okay,
Did you
let's
see the?
continue our foundation service. Paul, did you pull the library yet, or did you pull the code yet, or no?
No, I'm. Believe it or not, I've been up for about an hour and a half, and I'm still trying to catch up with the last stream. 2.5 hours, man. I was expecting it to be like an hour long.
What do you
So
say you do here? Let me let me add you in and then let's add you to the direct contributors. The thing about this is that you have to really you have to um, be a contributor on the project, not just fork out, because we are pairing on a branch in the main repository.
cool.
So let me add you in there. What's your thing again, Tewardy? Like that?
Yeah,
There you
yeah,
are.
that's me.
Yeah. Okay, so just accept that you should be good. I see the project kind of, gaining that some nice momentum. Like we really started, Brian, we started last weekend, right?
No, oh, for me, we started early this week. Yeah. So yeah, Sunday for you, I think it was. Yeah.
Yeah, we're already getting a lot of traction here, which is great. There's also GitHub did this new thing about active forks versus all forks, right? I'm glad that people are kind of looking at look at all these forks. This is all great. I appreciate this kind of the community engaging with us and building this with us. Okay, with that being said, let's get started. So who was the last person that wrote the last thing? Was it me?
I
Was it
think so.
I? Okay. So Elbic, why don't you kick this off?
All right.
And we need to handle the null completion exception.
All right.
Go for it.
Just let me know. Just let me know if it's the internet got better for me.
Okay,
Can you
let's
hear
go.
me? See me well?
I can hear you and see you well.
All right.
It's a
Yeah,
little.
just
Mhm.
adjusting the resolution now and sharing
Just
my.
quick question, Hassan. Which branch are we in?
We are in a just search foundations.
It's in Hassan's name.
It's under my name. Yes. Here's Elbic. Let's go.
Gotcha.
Christo had to tell me a couple of days ago. He said, "Stop asking in your live stream whether people can see stuff or not. We can see it. It's getting old. Move on." I was like, "Okay."
Can you see it, Hassan?
That's I need a 49-inch monitor just to make sure I can see everything. So, okay, let's do this.
Yeah, why it's.
What's happening here? Did you get kicked out of the project? What happened?
Yeah, what happened? I'm in the right branch and I'm trying to pull everything
Hmm.
in. The pull operation failed. Right.
Open up output.
Yeah, just let me share it again.
What? No. Have you ever used Visual Studio before?
Welcome, welcome to the welcome to the fun group.
Paul's not here, is he? No.
Oh boy, this is gonna be a long night.
Tell me about it.
So I'm glad that you excuse me. I'm glad that you joined in. Okay, we have finally a European represent. Oh wait, you exited out of that, didn't you? We have someone from the continent to represent Europe in here, so that's great.
The
Asia, Europe,
continent.
Australia, North America. Great. I think that's good enough.
Brilliant. Ah.
For some reason it says unable to access this thing and
Okay,
resulted.
okay.
Yeah,
So fix your sitch. I'm
uh-huh.
gonna take it from there.
All right.
Kailu, do you want to write me a test? Jump in. Go ahead.
Okay.
Let's
Okay.
go to town.
Ding dong. Nice.
Okay.
Let's go. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. No, not similar thing. Cool. Okay. Right. So you need some validations. Yeah.
Okay, your voice is a little far away. Can you get a little closer?
Yeah.
Come
So
back.
we need some validations. Yeah.
Need some validation. So the piece that we want to write now is to basically, if the completion request that's coming in is null, we're gonna throw null completion exception, and then we're gonna wrap that in a completion validation exception. Let's do it, brother. So while Kailu's doing that, Paul, how far did you go in catching up?
I'm 26 minutes and 38 seconds in.
In the first
So,
video, the very first
yeah.
one.
So no. I'm on part 3. So I think I might have missed part 2 though, because there's some coding here that I hadn't seen before. But it looks like you were talking about internal
Injection.
and external models.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That was yesterday. That's the longest one. That's 2.5 hour session.
Yeah.
And that's the bulky part of this. I couldn't figure out a way to kind of simplify it because there's a lot of these properties, and we needed just one passing test. If I cut the session or cut the stream halfway through, that wouldn't be very valuable, right? Because we still didn't get an end result, right? If I can at least get one or two tests, some tests are super quick. The stuff that Kailu's doing right now, we're gonna fly through these. That's not a problem, right? But just kind of, bringing up the idea that, okay, your brokers might not necessarily honor the pure contract concept. However, your foundation services need to enforce that, right? And by this, someone, like I said well, not yesterday, a couple of days ago in the standard discussions, I did say that, there are some voices, people that used to work with me on the standard, and they don't work with me on the standard anymore. They kind of split off, kind of pulled a Lutheran church kind of move, and they basically said, hey, we're gonna honor the domain based on the concept. So one service could handle 5 or 6 different models as long as they're running around the same concept. And I was like, what the heck does that mean? They said, we should be okay having student request and student response and student X and student Y and student Z. I said, where do you draw the line? They said, you don't. That's domain driven development. So that's where we kind of split way, because it sounds like a recipe for, oh, well, you're going to pass that contract upstream. Which one are you going to pass? Just the one or the 5,000 that you created for the one service? Welcome to hell on earth, right? So, I don't think, you know what, Paul? I don't think, there's enough appreciation or caution to how fast a software project can get, in terms of complexity. Once people start allowing themselves to kind of just, oh, it works, it looks simple, right? Well, show me what that looks like later when you have like 20 services or 50 services, right? And you're trying to maintain that. What would that look like, right?
It's kind of interesting because I quite often, like, I try to make my code standard compliant, but then I start to explore around it, and I deliberately do things differently and
Mm-hmm.
run sort of these ideas by you just to sort of say, like you were pointing at the pure contracts problem with brokers,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So all of my broker interfaces are pure contracts.
Good.
It's a thing that I do differently to the way that the standard is documented. But I have my justifications for it.
Mm.
and I'm happy with that. But the way that I kind of look at it is, as much as possible, if I can get like 100% adherence to like meeting the standard, I will.
Mm.
But if I can come up with a really good, reasonable justification that doesn't go against what the standard is trying to promote, then I consider it a valid change to the system
Mm-hmm.
to some degree, because it gives me the opportunity then to further progress things. And what often comes out of it is we have a discussion. I initially get obviously a little bit of negative feedback from yourself saying, oh, well, no, that's not going to be compliant. But then actually, I think you said in an OData Neo stream at one point, quite often what happens is you go away, you have a think about it for 3, 6, 9, even 12 months. And
Yeah.
then you come back to me and go, what was that thing that you were saying that you
Yep.
do differently? And I
Yep.
show you what I'm doing. And
That's where spell
quite
came from.
often,
That's where
yeah,
spell came from. Mm-hmm.
exactly. And quite often what then happens is an evolution to the standard as
Yep.
a result. And it's, I can imagine that there's a lot of us in the community that are doing that kind of thing.
Yep.
But a lot of it is really just continuing to ask questions, right?
Oh, you have them right here, Parker, from day one. He's like, well, what about we do it this way? Do it this way. Look, I don't want I don't want copies, walking, talking copies of the standard. I want people to actually engage their brain, because if we don't, then number one, we are actually a cult. I don't want us to be a cult. Number two, I want people to actually evolve the standard. As long as people are thinking about new ideas, new ways to evolve the standard. The fact that the standard evolves, that means it is open enough. It's open enough. I was literally talking to someone today about this, and they said, "Oh, so your standard is like that holy book that people follow." I said, "No, not at all. If it was holy, it wouldn't change every other day." Right? So forget about that idea. We want people to be able to kind of adapt, and kind of find out better ways to do the same thing. And that should never stop. It should never
Yeah.
stop.
And it's probably worth pointing out as well is that like the sort of systems that we tend to build, we're trying to build sort of like this robust kind of enterprise grade, very sort of scalable type products. These
Hmm.
are the sorts of problems that no one else will even talk about.
I
Like,
don't know why. I honestly, even Hanselman himself, he said nobody talks about enterprise because it's too damn hard. It's complicated, and nobody wants to talk about it because it doesn't get views, it doesn't get clicks. Do you understand? Like if I show up in a YouTube video, you saw some of these. Sometimes I spin up some of these, but I intend to use them later, right? To do something like this, C# class as friends, right? Do you know I got some real heat on Reddit because of that video? Some people were like, I don't understand. Why don't you just share a link or share a code and tell us this is how it works? I was like, well, I'm trying to set up, for something else, But there are folks that actually will solely do that, and that's okay. It's great content. It's it's certainly not the content that I'm trying to put through this channel, right?
yeah, it's an attention span thing, right? I mean,
Yeah.
as developers, like I've found as a community, most of the attitude that I get from people, particularly people that I'm mentoring as well, is like I'll be sitting down there saying, right, this is how we do a thing. Let's walk through it, and they're like, just give me the code sample and I'll read through it later. And it's like, yeah, but you're not gonna learn why I've made the decisions I've made if I just
Hmm.
give you the end result.
Hmm.
And I think I completely agree with your premise that like there's a journey here, and it's that journey that's important. It's not the end products that we really care about. It's the lessons learned along the way and ensuring that everybody is in agreement with those. And it's particularly important in the space that we're in because the nature of what it is, like you don't get products like Stack Overflow or Netflix or something as big as like Azure as a platform. They don't just spring up. Someone's got to build that stuff, right? And there's like maybe a handful of engineers that are capable of doing that well. And
Hmm.
I think that the nature of like what you're doing here and the standard combined is highlighting that. It's essentially pointing out that look, guys, you've been playing this little kiddie game like making HTTP requests for some time. Everybody knows how to do that. There's like a billion examples of how to do that out there. It's time to step it up.
Yeah. That's what Parker showed me the other day. Someone on Reddit said, "Hey, go to Hassan's channel, but just heads up. This is not gonna be kiddie software that, oh, hello world, we're all happy. It's gonna be really deep, you know." And people saw the depth of it with the Blazor series. By the way, Eagle Hansen, the guy who wrote the B Unit, which is a test framework for Blazor application, he said the same thing. He said to me, Hassan, this is what 10x developer is. It's not a guy that can work 10 times, than everybody else, but someone who can replicate and scale. So, whatever knowledge they have, 10 more people know that knowledge, and now they're evolving in their own way. And I hope that our community continues to work this way. So, okay, just to kind of, coming back here, just for the people watching for the first time, because I was actually surprised but how many people reached out to me and said, "Hey, we didn't know about the C sharp converting to YAML thing." A lot of people, they were like, "I had no idea that you could do that." I was like, "Wait till you see what I can do with CSS. I can write C sharp code that turns into CSS and Blazor, which is pretty cool." But coming back here, what Kailu is basically doing is that he's writing a test that we need to throw a null completion exception if and only if the incoming input is not valid, right? And the failure of this test would make sense because he's trying to extract properties out of an object that's already null. So of course it's going to fail for all the right reasons. I'm going to take the screen here real quick, and then I'm gonna try to make Kailu's test pass. So just for the people watching, this is how we pair program, right? He writes a failing test, I make it pass. I write a failing test, he makes it pass. But because there's many of us in here and we're having fun and building something, I can think of some of these sessions as like a podcast, right? We're talking about all kinds of things, but at the same time we're actually producing something. We're actually building something and having fun doing it. Okay, so I'm gonna run to just make sure I have Kailu's failing test in here. And you guys are gonna see this in the commit history. It's beautiful, right? Because it can show you how a feature been developed, in this gradual way. Should throw validation exception on prompt if completion is null, right? I'm gonna pull this guy down, if that's okay with UK, just one piece. I'm gonna pull this guy down. For the people wondering why I'm doing that, this little piece here is called uglification beautification. If you chain, I'm going to force you to push a tab. So if you go too far, it's going to look really horrible. So it's going to force you to actually break it into variables and stuff like that. So, okay, so what I'm going to do here, and watch this magic if you don't know about this trick, I'm going to go here and say, okay, I want to validate completion. Here's my completion right here. And then I'm going to write a partial class. You see how these guys are partial? We treat object-oriented programming, we treat objects as actually as 3D objects, and they have partial pieces and aspects. So I'm going to go here and say completion service.validations.cs. So that created one nested file underneath the main file or the root file. And then I'm going to call this partial, which is a feature that only C Sharp, as far as I know, C Sharp is the only language that I can think of today that has this capability. So I'm going to go ahead and say validate completion, private validate completion, and here's completion, right? And then I'm going to go here and say if completion is null. Here's a question for the group. When do we say completion is or object is versus object equals? Both are valid, but we started to standardize around that. When do we use null, or is something versus using equal? Just take a wild guess. This is not something you'll find on Stack Overflow. This is about the art of coding itself. Any thoughts? Ideas?
It's a readability thing, isn't it?
Oh yeah. Like like I would use equal if I'm comparing numbers. I would use is if I'm comparing everything else. Because you never in real life say, Paul equals smart. You say Paul is smart. That's my rationalization. Elbic, would you mind creating an issue on the C# standard repository so I can document this piece? Because I don't think I wrote that anywhere. It's just in my head.
can the is keyword be used to do other comparisons then? So if I've got like
Yeah,
two strings, can I say string is, string
yeah,
A is B, is string
yeah,
B?
yeah, you can, yeah, you can.
Huh. It's just
Oh
I've
yeah.
never, weirdly, every usage of the word, the keyword is, has always been followed with null, but actually I never thought of using it as an alternative to equality comparison.
Yeah. So check this out. We have this validate completion going on here for us, which is great, right? But we want to handle the exceptions. We want to communicate. We want to create, it's going to create an inner exception. We want to throw that. If we go and do this in here, if I go and do this like this, just for the people who are not familiar with this, these exceptions can get really, really big. Like we could have another block and another block, another block, and now you can't see the logic anymore. So what do we do? A while back, I introduced a concept called noise cancellation. Exceptions, noise cancellation. And what it basically does is that we go like this and we say, hey, why don't I create a delegate? So private delegate, right? Something that returns a value task of a completion, right? I don't know where it got that from, but we didn't write that anywhere yet in the project, so it's definitely looking at something. And then I'm gonna go here and say value task completion, try catch. So this try catch is taking a delegate that returns a value task of a completion like this. Let me kind of, oh my God. And I basically gonna go here and say try, and then I'm gonna go here and say return await returning completion function like this. So I'm awaiting this to execute. And then what I'm actually catching is something called null completion exception. Because this is a library, there's no logging here. We didn't do logging. Whoever is writing this is going to have to handle that themselves. So what I'm going to do this, I'm going to go and say new, new completion validation exception. And here's my null completion exception. We're done. So where do we use this? Where do you use this function, right? We're gonna go up in here. See how we're gonna hide away all the try catch, async, open up this guy, and then go all the way down here and basically say your async is gone. Now you can add and scale the exception handling. You didn't hurt your business logic. Your business logic is still very much so intact, right? Now there's one more thing to this. Do you see how we went in here and we basically, these two things, they're doing the same thing. They're basically taking a completion, getting the request, passing the request, and getting a response. We can actually encapsulate both of these into one private function. So you're reading much better this way. So I'm just gonna go here and say extract a method, and I'm gonna go say post completion request async. So this way, your code is precise one piece at a time. It's doing very precise pieces, right? So instead of, if you want more detail, sure, go ahead, dig into more detail. But if you're reading high level function, you're only reading that I'm validating, posting a completion, and then taking that response and converting it back to a completion model, and that's it. It makes things a lot easier to read this way. Okay, so I talked too much, but all that stuff that I just wrote in here, does that make this pass? I don't know. Let's find out. There you go. So that means I have this, and this is passing, and this is happy and everything. This is handling the validations section into the prompt. So now it's my turn to write a failing test, right? So this is pass. My next failing test is going to be focusing on making sure, see, if you go through the request through the data, you will notice in here that when the completion comes in, we validate, and then we take that completion and we basically extract from that completion an external completion request. You're validating your data as you go. And what that basically means is that we go and extract information from the request section in that completion. So I need to make sure that this request is not null, basically. How do we do that? Right? It's not the same thing as what Kailu did with the overall object. It's going to be validating certain properties inside that object. So check out this test in here. I'm going to go up in here and say, here is fact public async task should throw validation exception on prompt if completion is invalid. That means it has properties inside of it that are not good and they need to be reported out, right? So here's given, when, then, and then I'm going to start like this. I'm going to go and say, okay, here's my invalid completion. And this completion is invalid because the invalid completion dot request is null. Now here's something. I could very easily remove that line and it's still going to give me the same result, but I'm not showing you what exactly I'm testing in here. I need to show you that, I am going to throw this exception specifically because the request is null, right? So let's do this. So I need var invalid completion exception, new invalid completion exception, which I don't have yet. We don't have that exception yet. So let's just go ahead and create it real quick. So I'm going to head into the exceptions area and I'm going to add in here a invalid completion exception. And then I'm going to take in what copyrights in here, Control KE, take that out. And then in here, I'm going to say inherit from exception. If you don't know this exception library, it's basically a library that helps us kind of build really robust, kind of easy to maintain with, validation data and all that. You have a validation report that basically allows you to be able to report all the issues, in your system. So I'm just going to go here and say if invalid completion error occurred, I think it's two C's, occurred, fix errors and try again, right? And it's errors like that. And there's no inner exception to handle, so this is all good. And then I'm gonna go up in here and say Control KE, and then I'm gonna go down here and say, okay, so for this prompt in here, I need to go and say invalid completion exception, my report, so add data, and here's my key, name of, so never ever hard code, with your hand um, the value of the properties, because if we change the property, it needs to reflect. So name of would kind of do this for you outside the box. And we're just going to need to say object is required. Why object and not request is required? Because you already reported the name. You already said request name, and the error here is that this object is required. Some people will do value is required, and that's okay too. Now I'm going to go here and say completion validation exception, which is writing it for me right here. And then pretty much whatever Kailu did in the bottom. So I'm going to take all of this. I'm going to throw this in here. So I'm basically saying make sure that it's throwing a validation exception. Instead of null, it's invalid completion. And, oh yeah, this should be expected. Expected completion validation exception. So take that guy here. And that's your guy. Ronald is saying, will this only use the chat? No, no, no. We're gonna do the image. We're gonna do the chat. We're gonna do the completion. We're gonna do like that. Chat GPT-4 now has image and text that produce text. We're gonna do all of them, Ronald. We're having fun. I wouldn't want this to end too fast. I want this. I want us to release a beta and then continue to build on top of it and try new ideas and new things, business applications that can actually be useful for people.
I was reading something in the news suggesting that GPT-4's model will also support video.
Oh, video, that would be great. Oh my God.
Yeah, so it'd be interesting to see if we can incorporate that as well.
Absolutely.
I think
Yep.
like when you build libraries like this, it'd be interesting to see what people do on top of it. It's not so much the library itself that's kind of like the good thing about this. It's the stuff that like with David Fowler making ASP.NET, right? ASP.NET in itself is not really the interesting product. It's all the stuff that sits on top of it that he's enabling. So yeah, it'd be really cool.
In one way, just so you understand, OpenAI is fairly new. And imagine if you're learning about OpenAI while you're building a tool for the community. That's the most beautiful way to learn because you're not just learning things and keeping it to yourself, your goodness extending beyond, just having something to yourself. And as we're learning this, I think there's a lot of great stuff that we'll be learning along the way. We're using what we already know and we're adding new stuff on top of it, and then we're evolving, we're growing, right? Anyway, so I have a failing test in here. I went through this a little bit fast. This test is failing for all the right reasons. Why? It's saying object reference is not set to an instance of an object because it's trying to access the request model, which we haven't validated yet. So now I'm gonna hand this over to Ryan. Why don't you take it? Fail. Or should I give it to Paul since he's new? Let's give it to Paul. Paul, here. Take it. You're on mute, Ryan. I can't hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I agree, Paul.
Paul, go to town. Let's see if you actually pulled the code.
Come on.
Did
you
you
want me
pull?
to
Did you actually
work?
pull the code?
I did pull the code, yeah.
Well, I
But
don't believe you. Show me.
check this out. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Let's have a look. Probably best I share the window, not my entire screen.
That would be nice.
Yeah.
We're all, because this is we're all sitting on 150. So if you can make it, there you go.
Pixels.
Yes.
Okay. So
That's very small.
it is, isn't it? Isn't it great?
Yeah. There we go.
Is
Okay.
that done?
Making your screen smaller doesn't increase your text. Oh, actually it does. Never mind. Yeah, keep going. This is great. Yeah, you're filling in the whole screen. Fantastic. Let's
Fine.
go, son. You're making it hard. Make sure
Is
you
that
pull
better?
latest. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, let's get latest.
I was reading the same about the video stuff, Paul, and I was quite interested in that as well. But I can't imagine that'll be cheap.
I don't know. I mean, you'd think that like YouTube would be expensive, right? Because or like Netflix, because like in modern computing terms, like video is probably one of the most expensive things that you can do in terms of
Streaming.
storage and compute resource, network bandwidth, right?
Yeah.
But actually, I think we've gotten to a point now where these things can be made reasonable if it's done at scale. But yeah, it'd be interesting just to see what happens, basically.
Maybe there will be a point in time where, videos can be shared across CDNs the way images are today. Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Why am I not getting... Where's the tests?
Just click run all. Just click run all.
I just did. And it's
click the 5. Do you see number 5 at the top? Because you're filtering like torrents. Ronald. Ronald's like, oh, like torrents. Yeah. A lot like torrents. That's right.
Let's just run all the things. TV should be true. Well, no, there should be more than that. What's going on? Come on.
Okay, I'm gonna ask you a very important question right now.
Yeah. Have I filtered out all the completed? I have. What's that?
Click on that guy that you were just at. Click on it.
This
Not
one.
that one. The other one.
There you go. This is the failing one, right? This is the one I
that
want.
Works. Sure.
God, it's too early for me, man.
It's 6 in the morning.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
I mean, the only people that are having fun with this, like doing it during normal hours, is Brian and Elbic. For them, it's noon and morning sometime there, so they're having fun. Kailu and I are barely keeping our eyes open, and Wardy just started the day, so it's fun.
I guess it's an advantage of having 2 young children. So let's put it down to that, shall we?
Yeah. Get you up. You gotta take them to school. Gotta do the do.
Yeah. Okay, so we're getting a null reference exception.
Yeah.
My understanding is that we want our specific exception, which is the new one. Where are we? Models, completions, exceptions. An invalid completion exception, right? This is the one we want.
Precisely.
Okay, so our method being tested is prompt completion.
Yeah.
Async.
All these OData sessions finally coming fruitful. I'm very glad.
Yeah. See, I do listen to you once, maybe twice.
Kailu probably already wrote that in his head, like it's already done over there, but we're just watching.
Probably, yeah. So we're
Mm.
expecting in here a new
Invalid.
catch block. Do you want to underneath this one, yeah?
Yeah, it should honor the chronological order or potential order of things.
Nice.
Like you were more likely, I mean, start with null, do invalid. No, we already did null, right? We need to catch invalid, right?
Catch invalid. Wait, catch what?
Invalid completion exception, right?
So, is this going to be throwing it? Is it?
Well, it's not yet, but it will.
Right. So, yeah. Okay. So I need to catch. So in here, I need
I
to
love
say.
putting him on a live stream like that and just watch him just.
Is now
Mm,
throw that.
If there was only a way to do this in a different way, but sure. Let's see.
So this is the guy that we
Mm-hmm.
ultimately want to throw, right? But we don't want to
Yeah.
throw that here.
No, you can throw it somewhere in this file. However, it also has some data inside of it, right? It has some error report inside of it, right? It's getting better by the minute. I love it.
Yeah. So are we? So when you validate here, do you still want to throw the null reference exception here? And then
you will
and
never
then we create.
You will never you will never ever throw null reference exception. You're getting a null reference exception because you're trying to access a property that we didn't validate for null.
Right. So our validation doesn't need to do that then.
It does not. It needs to do something else, however.
All right. So in the try catch, I need to handle a null reference exception, or do I need to handle the invalid?
Invalid. There you go.
Right. Invalid completion exception. I was just trying to get what page you're on here.
Sure.
I'm so lazy with my exception handling. It's unreal.
It's page 10 after at night. That's the page that I'm on right here.
That's it. Yeah.
So let's do it.
So we need to throw a new. This is a
completion
validation exception, right?
Mm-hmm.
This guy. And
you can do it, Paul. I'm rooting
the inner
for you.
exception is this guy, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so and now I need to make that the case, right? So that one of these gets thrown. Okay, so now I go back to my validations, and then I say if completion. Sorry, I'm going around in circles here.
So do you remember the business rules engine, the 9 lines of code business rules engine? No. Anyway, make it pass the way you like. Just make it pass. I'll clean up after you. No problem.
No worries. Throwing you. What was the exception? This one. Right. And you said there's some data that we need to pass in here, right?
Yep.
So we're passing in. What is data?
Well, you have a method that does that for you. So why don't you just declare a variable and then call absert list?
What in the exceptions library? I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah, you are. You just don't know that you are. It's var new invalid completion. Just put it in a variable. I'll show you.
All right. So.
Brian, get ready because we need to know what is required in the request. This coming one is the big one. We need to know what's required as properties and what's not. So we are running into this new weird situation where we need to know what can't what needs to be there or what can't have non-value. So it's beyond required. Like you could have a value, but it's still invalid. That's the tough part. You're on mute.
We're talking about the defaults we sort of need.
Exactly.
Yep.
Mhm.
Presumably I can just pass in null here. Or do you want me to actually pass in the value here?
I don't know. Look at the test, see what it's doing. Elbic is laughing at you so hard, just quietly, like he's keeping himself composed, but he's just taking you for a ride in his head right now.
Here we go. This guy, right?
Mm-hmm. Cool.
We're good.
All right, run it. Let's see.
Want me to wrap that?
Oh, doesn't like that. Maybe you need to throw it as an exception.
Yeah, that would help, wouldn't it?
That would help a little. Not a lot. It would help just a little bit.
Way too early in the morning for me.
Done.
There we go. We're done.
Mark that as complete and Elbic fix it. Standardize.
Right.
What's
So
the test name?
test name is this guy, right?
Yeah. Watch what this guy's gonna be doing because he's gonna be doing it a lot. So watch that part. And then we'll give it to Brian, after that.
There we go.
Well, Brooke says he loves your coding style.
Oh dear.
All right, Elbic, take it from there.
I'm not sure if that's a good thing.
And then Ronald is saying, is that object the prompt text? No, it's the request, the text inside that request, Ronald.
So, well, there's this method called validations engine, which runs through the validations and adds the exception data. Just okay. Let me go to validations.
Hey, Elbic, before you do that, you want to see something cool? Go at the top right. Do you see these 3 buttons at the top right
Yeah.
in your Solution Explorer? Top right.
Solution.
Yeah, that
this
guy.
one, right?
Yeah, go web.
Yeah, this is
Oh,
disabled for me.
Brian, why is it disabled for him? Do you know?
No, not off the top of my head. No.
That's weird. Okay, that doesn't matter. Keep
On my
going.
other on my other laptop, it was good, but this one I don't know. So
Okay.
what I can do, we can automate this manual input
Paul,
from
pay
through
attention.
this method. So this is gonna be private and just void, and we call it validate.
Uh-huh.
So it gets params with dynamic dynamic rule, which we'll be writing soon, and then it gets string parameter name, and it's going to
Yep.
be an array. So we
Yep.
call it validations. And in that validations, we create a new, was it invalid completion exception?
Mm-hmm.
And since the right-hand side is very clear with new, we use var, and then we just loop through validations, and in here we need to deconstruct this variable.
Mm-hmm.
And since this is not clear, we use dynamic. And since those names shouldn't collide, I just make it lowercase. And in that validation, so which we'll be writing soon, in that rule, it will have this thing called condition.
Condition. Mm-hmm.
And in that condition, and if that condition is met, we just get our exception and absurd data list, which includes key as a parameter and value as a message in our rule.
This is how you're going to add multiple rules and let that
Yes.
engine run for you, right? Okay.
Yes. And then once we loop through each validation, we just call this exceptions throw if contains errors method. So what it basically does, it looks at the it looks at this data component, and if there is some errors in it, it just throws. Otherwise, it just goes because it should be void. Yeah, it's
hmm
void. So now, since we have this invalid completion, validate completion method, I just call it using control RR to be not null. I create a new private method here. So this is private void, and I call it validate completion.
Nice.
And in here, I just do completion, get completion. And there are two types of validations, the one circuit breaking ones and the non-circuit breaking ones. So the circuit breaking one is this, when we validate against null value. So I call this validate completion not null. Yes.
Yep.
So if it is null, it just breaks the validation engine and just throws this exception. However, when we are looping through each validation, it doesn't depend on each other. So they are non-circuit breaking. And in here, I just call a new rule, which I'll be calling is invalid. I don't have that yet, but I'll create it soon. Completion.request, right?
Yeah. Is request invalid? Oh,
Okay.
that works too. No, you're fine. Is invalid. You're fine. Keep going.
So in here, I will just send parameter, name of, what was the name? Let me go to the,
Completion dot request.
oh yeah, not request. Okay, so I need one here and I need one here. All right, let me create this is invalid. So it's gonna be private and it's gonna be dynamic and it is invalid. It's gonna be an object.
No, put the actual request. Yeah.
All right,
I think that works too. I think that's okay too.
it's gonna be more generic, right?
Mhm,
In this
mhm,
way. So we are gonna have two properties here. The one is rule,
mhm.
which states object.
Condition?
All right, yeah. We just need to pay attention to this dynamic thing, because otherwise, like if I said this rule, it would say it would go here to condition and says runtime exception.
Yeah,
I couldn't bind the whatever. So
right.
it should be message, and I just copy paste the message here. All right.
Well, why would you not define a model for that?
Or what?
What you're using dynamic for?
Oh, this? Because it's internal, it never goes outside of this scope. And you end up in two situations. Either you create a generic model, which does entanglement, or you create a rule model for every service, but it never goes beyond that scope. So there is no need to create a model there.
Not even like a private class. So you can have a class defined inside that service.
We just need something flexible enough that we can add localization to it in the future without having to worry about modifying a model for it.
Cool.
Yeah.
But it broke.
So
Why?
yeah, because I was calling null, not null here,
That's right.
instead of for the whole thing.
Good catch.
Yeah, and there's also one aspect of not creating another class. It's just my imagination. Do you remember when we were talking a class or one function as a whole object,
Mhm.
and if yeah, let me just quickly spin this up.
Or even a
So
struct would do, right?
yeah, so
Struct.
Yeah.
if it's considered like an object here, everything should be contained in it. So validations from one side, and exception handling from the other side, and logic from the center, right? That's the
I love
basic.
it.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the basic form. And if we create another class, so it would look something like this.
Honestly, I abuse dynamic like it's going out of fashion, but it is one of these things that, like, whenever I show somebody a code sample that uses the dynamic keyword, they're like, "Oh, never use that. There's never a good reason for using that because
Yeah.
reasons, and they've always got a list of reasons as to why dynamic is bad." But I think I agree with you guys on this. Is that, like, if the dynamic usage here is self-contained within this service, it's not going anywhere. It's not going to affect anything. There's no risk of dynamic being dynamic enough that it's problematic, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's very basic usage, right? Just two properties, and we shouldn't do a typo here. And there's this thing called I know everybody sure knows that, which is called fluent validations. And if we are gonna use our fluent validation, our entire message would look something like this. So it has another class which does only validations. So
Elbic, are you
yeah.
showing something? Are you showing
Oh,
something?
oh, really? Let me share my whole screen. I was actually drawing the masterpiece there. Oh,
That's
come on.
king.
Yeah, let me show you this.
Yeah. Yeah, there you
So
go.
so I was
Wow.
actually so I
That's
was
much
actually
better.
saying so I was actually saying so this if one box is one class, so when we are doing the standard way, every class is self-contained. So validations on this edge and the exceptions on this edge.
Yeah.
And
It's 3D
whenever
model,
we are
right?
yes, it's everything self-contained. But if we use, for example, fluent validations on top of our class, which contains the logic, it would look something like this. And if we create another exception class for our exceptions, just like Paul said, it would look something like this. I don't know. Yeah. So that's how I visualize our feature. So yeah. I was actually drawing this whole time, but yeah, okay. So
Okay. So
here's
Elbic now, so Elbic, before you move on to this,
mhm,
let's bring the focus back here to the stream. Um, um, while you're committing this. So Brian, now the
mhm.
question to you. Sorry, I'm gonna put you on the spot here. We have two options here. Okay, we can either throw validation exceptions on the people that will provide the model with missing values or invalid values, or we can use default values, which is
Mm. Yeah,
a little.
I'm
Mhm.
thinking the default values is probably going to be the way to go. We need to take the values that they give us and then add all the extra default values to the model that they haven't supplied. That's what I think.
Because then if they make a request, they're gonna have to answer
Yeah,
all the properties unless we give them the default values, right?
yeah. Either that or we construct the class with the default values in it.
Mm. Is there any required properties in that model? Sorry, I'll take your screen for a sec.
There is really only one required property, and that's the model, the property called model.
Okay, so the only one that's required in the completion here on the request is the model. Everything else is optional,
Yes,
even the prompt, even the
yes,
prompt.
I believe so. Yep.
But so
I don't
okay,
know. It sort of doesn't make sense to me, but if you look at their documentation, it says it's optional. So I don't know what you know.
so even if the documentation says it's optional, it doesn't make sense to make a prompt without a prompt.
Yes, I agree.
So let's do this. Elbic, write a failing test for model and prompt being required,
All right.
and hand it over to Brian.
All right.
Let's go. I'm sorry about all the coughing, guys. Let's go.
So how are we going to handle the default values?
Honestly, I am a big enemy to having default values in the model because it kind of. Paul, what do you think about default values in the model?
So I've got some weird situations in my own stuff where, for example, when we import our transactional data, we create the like a datetime timestamp on the record in the database that says, hey, it was created at this point in time.
Right.
So that's a default value that's defined by our system.
Mm.
What I did there was I just set that value in the foundation service, and then I validated that was happening. Obviously, using a datetime broker or whatever gives us the ability to test all of that. Whether or not it was right or wrong, I don't know. I was in a weird sort of middle ground about it, because on the one hand, it's kind of like you're passing in the data, or the user passes in the data, and then what actually comes back is something that has been modified. So that can be quite jarring as a consumer of that API.
Yep.
On the other hand, if it's a well understood, documented default of the system, in that you expect that behavior to happen, it can be quite convenient for consumers. In our case, the problem that we have is you want that information to be correct, because, like in my case, it was like an auditing field. And the only way you can perfectly ensure that that information is correct is to manage it systemically. With this case here, what we're talking about is we've got to meet the requirements of an external API.
Right.
How do we assert that we've met the minimum requirements of that API? So I guess my viewpoint on it is, if it's absolutely essential to make the call, and it's something that we absolutely do not need from the caller, and we can assert, if you like, a default value on it. If it's like needed but optional from our point of view, then I don't see any harm in defining a value. But I think it's probably a case of we should try to stick to the, if you like, the requirements that we have on us in our own API, if that makes sense. So you've got that chain, right? So yeah, pretty much. I'm probably going about this, I'm butchering this probably, but effectively, if we have to provide, say, 10 values to the API in order to make the call, then we should require 10 values to be given to us, is the bottom line here.
But hang on. Here's a count. Go ahead.
I was going to say, rather than accepting one value and then setting the other 9 to some value, we should just return that as an exception and say, hey, you need to provide these values. And then people will just be familiar with it, the more they use the API.
There. And also, Brian, how do you even, like, if you rely on some default values, anybody can go and change the default values on your model, and your test won't be able to catch it.
Yeah, I was going to, I need to point out is, when they say these values are optional, when we do the post, because we're using C#, we're actually providing values for every property in the class. What they're saying is, when they're optional, you don't need to post the properties. They will put in the default values themselves.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
We're only doing it because during the serialization. Well, why don't we tell the serializer to not post the objects that are null?
Yes,
we can do that.
Yep, that'd probably be a smarter way.
I would be massively in favor of that. It's an over-posting problem, isn't it?
Yes.
It just creates network overhead for no reason.
So, Brian, do you mind creating an issue on RESTful sense to enable an option for ignoring null values or not including null values?
Not a problem.
Thank you, sir. I could tolerate that a lot more than
Yeah,
a
it's a lot
def
cleaner. Yeah. Sorry.
So the issue, what were you saying, Brian?
No, I was just saying, I'm with you here. That it's a lot cleaner that we not post the values rather than try and populate default values,
That's it.
and then
That's it
and
right
then
there.
and then argue with our clients with what the value should be.
Right. That's it right there. Okay, I can get behind that. That's much easier than default value. Ronald says, I think the list of messages is also required. Yeah, the prompt, right? This would contain the prompt text itself. Yep. Elvic, did you do the prompt as well or no?
Actually, yes. Here,
So
just
what?
text is green.
Yeah, what Ron is saying is that he's like, okay, this is null you're gonna throw, but also we need to throw an exception if the list itself doesn't have any items in it. I think that's what he means. It's just for the chat though. For other functionality, there are fields required. That's right, Ron. That's correct. We're gonna need another test for it. Just give me this one. Instead of saying text is required because it's an array, say value. Value is required. And the same thing for the one above it.
Why not just
Model?
use the?
It's just a string.
Prompt is an array. Oh, for the model? I know
Yeah.
it's a string, but let's just go with value for now. Okay. All right, give me a failing test.
Yeah, just this OpenAPI broker reference.
Look at this guy. He's a gangster. Don't mess with that guy. He's
Crazy.
good. He's done it a million times.
Yes.
Ryan, do you think you can make that test pass?
I'm sorry. I'm still posting an issue.
Still in the issue? Give it
Yeah.
to me. I'll actually, Kailu, take this over. What? Is it failing for the wrong reasons?
The same name already.
Oh yeah, scroll up a little bit. Scroll up. Scroll all the way up.
This
Change
is
that.
null.
Yeah, change that test name to is completion if request is null. If request is null.
Oh, all right. Let's try one more time.
This is the best way I can think of into kind of getting into that OpenAI world while we're, learning about the system and the models and how they work and all that.
Yeah, I think as the API that we depend on grows and evolves as well, I think it's going to result in us having to rethink certain approaches to certain requests that we make of it.
Yep.
Just pushed.
Okay, hey Kay, are you still around?
He's fallen
Yeah,
asleep.
I'm still here. I'm still here.
Yeah, he's here. Okay, Kylo, you're it. Go for it.
Hmm. Okay.
Brian, I'm also gonna throw an exception of the prompt array is there, but it doesn't have any values in it. Any objections?
No, that sounds fine to me. That's sort of the purpose of the library, isn't it?
I wanna give this task that you just created to Christo. Maybe Christo will do it. He loves RESTful sense. He invested a lot in it. So, and then Brian, you and Christo and I need to talk about consolidating RESTful sense to have just one library, so we don't have WebAssembly and the framework and all that.
We need to talk about some coverage in your posts on your tests as well. So
That's right.
Something. Yep.
There's somebody posted. Was it you, Brian? Actually, posted in the community that you can multi-target your assemblies. So you can build a library and you can say it targets these multiple versions of .NET.
No, it wasn't me, but I've seen this. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but basically, yeah, if you're talking about like consolidating things, you can have like one build of it all, and you can say, hey, this will work under WebAssembly, and it'll also work on the back end for .NET 6, .NET 7.
Part of the issue, Paul, was there was a lot of stuff in there with controllers and stuff that WebAssembly doesn't need. Just yeah, and it was using libraries that weren't compatible with WebAssembly. So
what I've typically done to solve problems like that is I create like my core logic in a core project, and then I have like an additional. So like when I did eventing, I did like my core eventing library. So it would be like, my project name dot eventing. And then I had like my project name dot eventing dot Azure Service Bus for doing like the Azure Service Bus specifically extended pieces of it that sat on top of my eventing library. So it was a feature kind of that in the spirit of SPAL, it allowed me to extend the existing functionality that was already there into like this new kind of way of looking. So I could depend on, in the Azure Service Bus library, the core functionality and interfaces. But it was an optional extra that could be pulled in on top of that core. So if you've got like a web build and a WebAssembly build, you might have 3 projects, for example. And then you have like a core one that has all of the core guts of the logic that is, really truly platform independent. And then the 2 child ones depend on that and then add the platform specifics. Does that make sense?
yeah.
This is how I approach EF as well. So I have like a core, like a data library that sits behind my brokers. And then I have like a data.SQL library that deals with like Microsoft SQL. And then I'll have like a SQLite library that'll deal with SQLite, and it'll pull in the relevant dependencies. So then when I'm like actually setting up my applications, I pull in my data one, which is a core one, and the relevant database server that I'm going to use by configuration. But then I only have to depend on that particular database client. But my model is interchangeable between database services. Does that make sense?
Not yet on that one yet. Not yet on that one, Kay. Go ahead, Paul. Not yet. Just check if it's null. That's it. Thank you, Kay. Should we call it prompts, Brian? Prompts.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Prompts are questions, and prompts is probably a better word.
Elbic, create an issue on OpenAI.net code rub. Change local model property name for the completion request from prompt to prompts, because I think the name is broken. The name is saying prompt, but we're actually asking for an array. What's interesting, though, just so everyone understands, is that the API will allow you to post just a string or an array of strings. And I find that quite unsettling and concerning, because your contract now, you're basically telling me that your contract is unstable. It's unstable because sometimes you can take a text and sometimes you take arrays, an array of text. That's very, very interesting.
Is it
So
unstable, or is it an overload of a method, essentially?
how, so you're talking to the same API and the contract can be an apple or an orange? That's unstable.
So I was thinking more of it like, so I've got a method on a service, do stuff, and it accepts some parameter, right?
Yeah.
So in this case, it's do stuff, give it a string, or I can have do stuff and give it a string array. That's an overload of the same method. So
Yeah, but you can't do
not?
that with APIs. You can't do that with APIs.
Why not? An API is just the same thing, but over a HTTP request, is it not?
Your API is supposed to have one contract. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, you're suggesting that we hit 2 different endpoints depending on whether we have an array or not.
Yeah.
No. I'm
/
suggesting
prompt and prompts. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm suggesting that what they're doing on their API is, depending on the contents of the request, they're mapping to a different internal method. Whether that's right or wrong or not, I don't know. But yeah, I think we should separate those two things out because I think it's much clearer from a contracting point of view. But Yeah,
Um,
I
uh,
wouldn't build an API that way.
Kailu, the request being null is a circuit breaker as well. Paul actually was right.
Wow, there's a first.
So
No,
you see how we're saying validate completion not null? We need another method. It's called validate completion request not null. Underneath that one. Paul, you got lucky.
I got lucky. Yeah,
I swear to God, you got lucky. I'm telling you.
doesn't happen very often. I'll take the win.
Uh, yeah, you could just patch the completion if you want, but that's okay too. That works too. Yep,
You're not
just create
you're not
another
te
method. Go ahead, Brian.
Sorry, Paul. You're not teaching Hassan the art of sledging, are you?
What does that even mean? Like, I don't even know.
Don't tell him. Let him suffer. He needs to learn English.
It'll
It's
just be
time.
an if statement, okay? Just like the validate completion not null. Just an if statement.
But
I
this
can't.
way it also works, right?
What?
In the case way.
Oh yeah, that's right. I'm sorry, Kay. Go back. No, Elbic is right. Thank you. Yeah, Control Z that one. He was right. Yep, that's it. You're
Did he
good.
get lucky too?
No, that one is gonna be big someday. You'll see. That one is very interesting. Doesn't have to be static. Yeah. Okay, friends, let's go. See, that's Kailu for you right there. He says the call order needs to match the call declaration.
Beautiful.
Learn something, Paul, for once.
Learning lots. Yeah. I'll forget it all by morning, no doubt, with my memory. But
All right, Kay.
it gives me the remaining 20 hours of today to revel in the fact that I've learned a thing. But then tomorrow I'll be like, Hassan, what are you on about?
Uh-huh. And I swear to God, I'm telling you right now, he wrote that business rules engine at least one time during OData Neo. I mean, it's 77 sessions. 77. But anyway, the next test is write a failing test, Kailu, for when the prompt is existent, but it doesn't have any elements in it. So that's going to be a fact, right?
How do you keep track of everything? Because I find that the standard is not simple, right? There is
It's
a
not.
lot to it, and I know you pride yourself in going to the nth degree to make it so that literally anyone can pick it up, but on its face value, just writing brokers and foundations and processing's dead easy. But when you actually really start to get into it, there's a lot of complication in there. There's a lot of specifics. It's a lot of rules to remember.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem I have, and it's kind of a running joke in this house actually, is my short-term memory is absolute garbage. I don't retain anything. Like the wife can I don't know, feed me dinner, and an hour later she'll be like, "What did you have for dinner?" And I'll be like, "I don't know." It is so bad. I spoke to the doctor about it. He said, "Oh, that's normal. Everybody gets that." And I'm like, "No, it's not. It's not. Surely, no one's that bad." But yeah, it's
No,
for
Kailu,
me.
just go empty. Kailu, do open, close, empty squigglies. Go ahead, Paul.
For me, this is my biggest problem with standard adoption, right? Because when I'm having to do code reviews, I have to literally open up the standard and be like, okay, where am I? Okay, I'm in a foundation. So I'll go and find the bit on foundations. I also need to pull up the C# standard and look at, variable naming, things like that. And I will read portions of the standard, and then I'll read portions of the code, and I'll go, does this match?
Look, whatever is documented in the standard today, that's about 30% of what we're actually practicing.
Oh God, yeah.
It's really It's not everything that's out there, but also it takes a lot of hard work and practice. I write insane amounts of code every day. You would freak out. Like a lot of the things that you're seeing, that's just the public stuff. But there is private stuff that I'm working on. There is private projects, a lot of things that haven't seen the light yet. It would freak you out, right? Last year I made 3,200 something commits. You're gonna have to do it every day. You're gonna have to practice every day. You're gonna have to build that muscle, right? It's not a coincidence that Elbik, Kailu, and I only had to share like one tiny hint, and they're just going. It takes a lot of practice. You have to write code every day and a lot of it to build that muscle. It's like going to the gym, right? But to your point, I also could do a better job at documenting the standard, right? I could, there's, we can document as much as we can, but it's an interesting endeavor. Um, Mabruk says I'm standardizing Microsoft Identity. Well, Paul is your guy if you're gonna do security and stuff like that, Mabruk. And
I
then,
already have a library that does portions of it. I was going to suggest actually as an extension to the standard, we do like the standard patterns and practices.
mm,
So things like this validation engine, could be something that you could document as a thing.
mm,
And stuff around like the try catch pattern. It's not part of the standard as written, but it's a common convention that we all use. But also explaining things like exceptions, like why we use the exception with an X library. What is that giving us?
mm-hmm,
And restful sense when we're talking to APIs. Like what is the thing that you've done that's improved standardizing code there at an API level and in dealing with APIs. And I
mm-hmm,
think these things, as they currently stand, are like massively undervalued. And I've found that I've learned those lessons the hard way by
mm-hmm.
saying, I don't need these things. I'll work around it. And then I hit some problem and I'm like, Hassan was right. This is stupid. And it's so bizarre, but like I'm one of these people that I don't learn the lesson unless I go down that road myself, run into the burning fire and
Yeah,
then be like, yeah, that was hot.
that's
you
that's
know
that's fair. I'll tell you this, that's fair. I also respect that. You should know this. I respect that uh, there will be a point in time where you just have to jump into fire. People learn in different ways,
yeah.
right?
But I
Um,
think that results in me actually taking it on board properly, right? Because when you get burned from that's a great metaphor, that when you get burned from bad experience like that, you actually do then think, oh, I don't want that to happen again. And it makes you think, okay, what was the lesson I really learned there? And you really do ingest it. Whereas if somebody just says, don't do that because I said so, you,
yeah,
you know what I mean?
yeah.
Like having the standard there, reading it and going, here's how you should do things, right? People are probably
Hmm.
reading your book and going, great, it either looks good or it doesn't look good, in their view.
Hmm.
But to my view, I like your whole premise around like the standard should be taught man to man, because despite having the book there, when you actually sit down like this and you do a session with people, there's so much stuff about it that I like
Hmm.
miss constantly. And actually, like just working with people that are really shit hot on the standard, it makes a hell of a difference.
Right, right. No, I understand. And I like the uh I'm totally with you on this part, and I like we need to have a way to communicate because people learn differently, so I need to present the standard differently. Um, let me do this though. So Brian, there's a question in the chat. I know that there's a max token of 400. What is it, Ron? 4,070 something? There's a maximum number of tokens that you can do before the whole system kind of falls apart and says you can't do that anymore. What's your suggestion there? Because I know also it's based on the price
Yeah.
of
So was
so.
Ronald's question there is actually quite interesting. We need to validate that on what are we allowing our clients to use
Hmm.
versus what we're allowed to use. And so there's going to be a situation where we can use too many tokens, and then we're going to get a response back that tells us we've exceeded our tokens. And there's also going to be a situation where we want to restrict the number of tokens that our clients are using.
So what do you say? Do we throw an exception? Do we add a validation error that says you can't have max token more than X? Because that's going to have to change.
Yeah, it'll need to be configurable in a way. Yes.
Or do we let
See,
the API throw the exception? Go ahead, Paul. Go ahead.
I think we should go the other way. I think this should be a feature of our library that when we identify that we're going to exceed the limits of the API we're calling, we should break the problem down, make multiple requests, compile the requests back into one response and push the response back, just
Look,
to allow people that flexibility.
look, if the validation is happening on the dependency, we can just call it dependency validation exception and we wash our hands from it. Say, go ahead. Unless we have a very strong reason that we need to enforce that limitation. Because
Oh
Paul,
yeah,
just so you understand, OpenAI themselves are the ones enforcing that rule. It's not us.
yeah, I get that. But what I'm saying is, like, if we identify that OpenAI have enforced that rule, potentially what we can do is we can say, okay, we know they're going to enforce that rule when we've got a completion request. Can we do some smarts around it, break down the request into smaller chunks and send that to the API to allow more scalability in our API than the OpenAI API allows for in terms of size of requests?
So I love that you said that because today I was just talking to Daniel Crane. He's also someone that's researching OpenAI. He's here with us in Seattle, and he said to me, actually, OpenAI does give you that outside of the box, but not in that particular request. There is a way you can chunk out, a bunch of requests, but also you have to understand there's also price tiers. I also like the idea that you can use the library to say, hey, stop me when I make that amount of requests. Although that OpenAI also gives you that outside of the box. Like if you look at the portal, they say if I exceed $25 of requests, stop right there, right? And I thought $25 was too little, but I've made crazy ton of requests and I'm still at like $3. It's crazy, right? But
Wow.
I expect it to go up. It's gonna go up,
Yeah,
but
the tech stuff is really cheap. I was quite amazed.
right. So, um, because to be honest, Brian, it's not really costing them much. It's a server that's sitting there. It's a dedicated server, right? So they're gonna have to pay that price for hosting that server one way or another, right? But then the cost comes in when they need to scale up or scale out, and then we end up in a place where, they need to make a decision to buy more hardware. Okay, friends, this should take care of all the validations that we need to do. So tomorrow, in our session tomorrow, we should be able to handle all the exceptions. So there's dependency validation exceptions, and this will take a little bit of research because we don't know what are all the exceptions that this API is throwing. We actually don't, right? So we know that there's unauthorized. We don't know what exception they're throwing when, you're running out of money. We know that there is codes that we hope that they're using according to the RESTful API standard that says, hey, you don't have enough money. Do they just say bad request? Or do they go and say, let's take a look here. So it's GitHub. I sure hope to God that they document their API. There's like a swagger that says, here's all the errors that you expect that will be thrown. But I know there is something like payment required. If you look at RESTful Sense, we have a thing here that says payment required. I could swear to God I have this somewhere.
Near the top. Near the top.
Yeah, there it is. Payment required 402. So do they throw that? Like if I were to be the one designing this, I should be throwing that exception. But do they? I don't know, right? So that's one part. And we also need to find out, um, there's okay, yeah. So Ron also said there's the rate limiting, right? What is the rate limiting? Is that too many requests exception, right? We need to understand, and the only way for us to do this is that we're gonna have. I highly doubt that this is documented because I looked at the reference, but just for all intents and purposes here, I'm gonna go on to the documentation and I'm going to look at the text completion API. And then in the completion here, I don't think there's any mention of errors. So that's how you know that, the maturity of software that you're working with and all that. So how do we work around this? Trial and error. We can,
This,
we, mhm.
this is a common thing with APIs, isn't it? Particularly big public ones. They always seem to document like the
It's
happy
rushed
path.
out. It's rushed out. Mm.
Yeah, and you get no information around. Oh well, in the event that you haven't specifically followed this particular happy path, what's going to
Mm.
happen? You get nothing. And
That
then it's like, oh well, you can just hang out on Stack Overflow or something and figure it out. It's like, no, that's horrible.
Like ideally, if I'm dealing with an API, give me a swagger for God's sake. Give me a swagger that tells me here's what I expect and here's all the errors. But nobody does that, unfortunately. That's why we have a standard, right? So I guess the bottom line here is we're gonna have to try and fail. So we're gonna have to, the unauthorized part, we can get that. We're gonna need to monkey around with the code a little bit. If the next session is just us trying that out, that's totally worth it because we need to gather all these errors and properly communicate in a meaningful exceptions way all these errors to our end users. And that's how you build a proper library that turns chaos into order. Um, anyway, thank you all for joining me today. This was a great session. And, what I'm gonna do here is that, of course, for the people watching, we're continuing to learn and grow, with the community. But, more importantly, I just want to make sure that we have everything out there, in that draft PR. This is still a draft PR. We're not done yet, so we're not going to do what OpenAI did and just get the happy path and then run, run, run and say, hey, publish it, let's go, make some money. We're going to wait until we handle all the exception. This is here, the history of this. This is how we're handling this. The beautiful thing is you can see literally fail, pass because it's running the build, right? So you get to see in real time, that we're actually test driven. We don't write something until we make it fail first and all. That's pair programming, pure pair programming. A little assignment for the people who are interested. If you can, we also need to turn most of these validation methods into static because not all of them require an instance. Actually, none of them require an instance. So this invalid methods and validate, they can all be static. Just someone for the community. It doesn't have to be this team. Someone who wants to get their hands dirty with open source and .NET development and be part of the community and all that. Okay, friends, do we have a deal? Connect with you tomorrow. Brian, get ready. It's gonna be your turn. So you're gonna be trying on Postman and
Hmm.
gathering errors and then
If
building
anyone,
up stuff.
if anyone from ChatGPT is watching, if I get my account banned, it's me just looking for all the errors.
We don't even know what code they're gonna be throwing when that happens. We're gonna literally have to get ourselves banned just to see. Oh my God. I mean that's the cost of building proper software. Be like, we went through all of these. I'm also gonna send them an email. I'm gonna send them an email, man. Maybe at Sam Altman on Twitter and say, hey, where's the documentation for all the exceptions, dude? I have no idea how to handle your API properly.
Mhm.
So we're gonna do the brute force way. You just hit it and try to get all the errors that we can get, but I'm also gonna annoy them a little bit because if we don't catch these it's going to end up being a HTTP response exception, which is the catch-all for all the other exceptions. How am I supposed to communicate that in a meaningful way? I don't know what to do. I'm just going to throw it as a dependency exception.
Yeah.
And then the person consuming this library is going to program against that the dependency is down. It's not their fault because it's not a validation exception. It's not a dependency validation exception. They don't know if it's their error, not their error. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys
How,
later. Thank you
how do
all.
you do how do you
Uh,
deal with things like the legal ones? Because like, I mean, you'd literally have to do something that is considered breaking the law in order to trigger that kind of exception, and it's like, surely we can like reach out to them and then be like, hey, can I do this but safely? Do you have like a test API or something?
we,
Test
we,
environment I can
we,
throw this at so I don't actually get banned and report it to the police.
we will certainly have to communicate with them, and in the kind of sense of, all honesty and just being able, I don't even know if we can talk to them, but I know that, okay, so if I go over here, do they, Brian, do they even have a way to communicate with them? I don't even know, dude. Like, I know they're probably getting bombarded with all kinds of different business proposals and all that. Search for help, all systems operational. Yeah, but not properly
Daft
engineered.
question. Has anyone actually tried asking ChatGPT about its own errors?
I am doing it right now, actually.
Oh,
Oh,
that's so cool.
Elbic, you're already doing it? Cool. We will be back online tomorrow. So there are actually people sitting down answering questions, although that this person here doesn't look like a real person. I don't know.
You reckon it's a generated image?
I think it is. Dude, it is. Look, I don't think it's real.
You're probably upsetting some ladies now.
I hope I'm not. If you are real, I'm very sorry. Well, that's probably a compliment because it looks like too perfect, you know. But anyway, Rami says there's an open API spec on their GitHub. Let's see. So if I go to OpenAI,
I really think
Rami to the rescue. Rami, do you have the link by any chance? Appreciate
Rami
it.
should join us. He's been helping us a lot.
He doesn't want to, he's shy. He said he's shy. He doesn't want to like. I understand exactly where he's coming from. I know the kind of engineers that'll be like, "Yeah, I'll help you from behind the scenes, but don't get me involved. I don't want to be a part of this." Um, Maybe okay. OpenAI. Let's see. OpenAI GitHub. Maybe I can do it this way. Yeah, there you go. Perfect. And then their API is. Let's see here.
They do so much stuff.
Yeah, they have about 146 repository.
Jesus.
Ron is saying it's either 401, 429, or 500. Okay, Ron, great.
Thanks. We'll consider that documented.
Is it OpenAI cookbook? I don't know. Just to kind of it looks like it needs a little bit of research. So what I'm gonna do here is that I'm gonna go on to our OpenAI in here, and I'm just gonna put a task in the project itself that says, um, documentation, research all OpenAI API responses for errors, the 4xx and the 5xx. And Brian, I'm assigning this to you. I'm sorry, you're gonna have to do it. It's your
Again.
problem, man. Yes.
Modern slavery.
I will kick you off the channel. I'm warning you.
You don't do
Don't
any
push
work.
me.
You just give it out to everybody else.
Yeah, I don't do work. I just hang out with people. Okay, Parker, you're it, right? So the ask is to find all the possible errors, especially I don't care about the 500s much because we just go and say dependency exception. But especially the 4xx, so we can map them into meaningful localized exceptions. And then I'm gonna add in the OpenAI repository here.
So
OpenAI.
see
Oh, he
what
said.
Rami's
Mhm.
suggesting here. OpenAI-OpenAI.
Yeah, let's see. Is that it?
Yeah,
OpenAI
it's
dash OpenAI.
Open API.
Yeah, sorry.
OpenAI. Just look at the issue I
Without the
sent
hyphen.
the link there as well.
Oh, did you send the link?
In the issue, yeah, just you created.
It's open API, all one word without the hyphen.
Oh, this guy.
OpenAI,
That guy.
OpenAPI.
This guy right here. So if that's their API, okay, Brian, this is all you. That's too much brain power for me. So, um, you do the work and I take the credit. That's how it works, right?
See? Told you guys. It's modern slavery. The only thing he's missing is a whip at this point.
You need help. You need serious help. Thank you all so very much. I appreciate you all, and of course for the amazing community that's supporting us and continuing to work with us on this. This is an amazing journey. I hope people are learning something for us because we're learning things too. And I look forward to tomorrow. Appreciate you all. Take care.